Look, I've always been a poet. I wrote my first poems when I was a teenager, and I think for me, poetry is a form that allows me to distill experience into a small number of words, and ideally a sort of powerful moment that has musical elements, it has visual elements in the composition of a poem. So a poem is a little universe in which all your senses as a writer are engaged. So that's really what draws me to poetry as a form. The genesis of a poem can be really long. You've got to work out what the poem is in your experience. We all have lots of, powerful life experiences. But to turn it into a poem that has resonance, I think, for an audience is an act of thinking, and that takes time. So for me, it's about thinking about what the poem is and then finding language that meets that experience. I think the key to being a really good writer is reading. I think the more you read different types of poetry, different kinds of writing, including those that challenge you, including those that are unlike your own practice, I think the more inspiration and the more sense of, what's already been written. There's such a rich history to draw on as a writer and to engage with. So for me, reading and then paying really close attention to the world, thinking closely about language. Poets of all writers, I think, spend the most time agonising over individual words, and thinking about all the resonances of what we say and why we say it. Poetry can take a really long time to reach its final form because poets are so finicky about language. I think it can take a long time to find the poem in the experience. So for me, it's an act of reading the poem out loud a lot. So I read to myself, see how lines sit with one another, listen to the music of the language. And then you do have a sense eventually that things have hardened into their final shape. It's a little bit like sculpting. You have kind of raw material and then you shave off all the unnecessary things. And then ideally, the end product is a poem in which nothing can or should be lost or changed. I think I hope for my poems to give people a quiet moment of contemplation. I think we're used to reading so quickly. We scroll on our phones, we digest information really quickly on the internet. And I hope my poems give people a quiet moment to sit with language and sit with experience. And I think ideally when we read a poem, we're entering into intimacy with someone else. I think where I am now, I teach writing. I'm a professor at a university, so I'm in a really lovely position where I have the opportunity to mentor lots of young writers, people who are coming to experience poetry for the first time and literary writing for the first time. I think when I think back to where I came from, it was really teachers of my own who brought me to where I am now. I was very lucky. I had amazing high school English teachers and incredible teachers at university as well. So in a sense, I probably see myself as carrying on the legacy of the teachers who've come before me. My golden rule is that you need to sit with a piece of writing and be really tough on yourself, tougher than you think any possible reader could be, tougher than you think any possible critic could be. And that often means not publishing a lot of the work that you write. I think poetry is the art of editing. It's the art of knowing what to leave out and knowing what you need to say. I think probably I'd tell my teenage self that there can be a career in writing. I think I felt that pressure that most young people do, I think, to think of jobs, things like a lawyer or a doctor or a diplomat or, whatever. Those were the kinds of reference points that I had for what a career could be. And it had never really dawned on me that I could be, an academic. That wasn't a kind of common career aspiration among my friends. And yet it's a career that makes me very happy. It's a career that has lots of different sort of strings to it, where I teach, I research, I write. It's brought me some really beautiful experiences in my life. I don't think you ever put a full stop on something, on profound experiences in your life as a writer, because we see these things differently at different ages. I mean, I saw my dad's illness differently when I was 20 than I do now at 40. And I think good writers often revisit these things and work their way through them slowly. So yeah, you'd never dare say as a writer, that's the last word I have to say about that.